One more guest left here on this Monday edition of the show. That is the great Kyle Hunter from HunterSportsPicks.com. Kyle, how's it going today, man?
It's going, man. Kind of a rough week here for the last week, and both my kids have been sick, and kind of feel like I'm getting it myself now. So apologies if I sound a little bit off today, but we'll do the best we can. And, it didn't help anything to take some really rough beats yesterday in the NFL, and just kind of licking my wounds here on Monday morning.
Well, at least it's not a busy time of year or anything, right?
Yeah, right. At least it's just, just laid back, hardly anything going on in the sports world.
Yeah, no, of course not. You got two kids to buy gifts for, or, college football, college basketball, NFL, NBA, NHL. Yeah, there's nothing going on. It's all good. I mean, if you're going to get sick, this is the time of year that you would pick.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I'd rather be sick than my kids, but it seems like it's just going to go through the whole house like it usually does. Anyways, we got a lot of bowl games here to talk about. Excited about that for sure.
So one of the things that I want to talk about here before we look ahead to the games that haven't been played yet, I want to look back at the ones that were played here over the weekend. And something that really stands out to me, and clearly this is something that I didn't account for enough, didn't really think about enough in terms of what I played on Saturday. I thought Colorado State was a great look. Colorado State came all the way down to 3.5, closed 3 with some books even closed 3 flat on that game, and they were not the right side, really at any point in that game for the most part. And you look at what happened on Saturday, Boise State knocks off Oregon. Now, Royce Freeman didn't play for Oregon, but Boise State was down a running back as well. Troy beat North Texas. Georgia State beat Western Kentucky, and Western Kentucky didn't really look very competitive in that game at all. And then Middle Tennessee State beat Arkansas State. And that Middle Tennessee State-Arkansas State game, the talent on both sides was pretty even. I would say in terms of the 5 bowl games on Saturday, that was the most even one from a talent standpoint. In the other 4 games, coaching and scheme clearly won out. With Oregon not having Willie Taggart, they still had Jim Leavitt. They had offensive coordinator Mario Cristobal as the head coach. So they still had their coaches that were in place, but Brian Harson's team was just ready to go. Same thing for Troy. Great second half adjustments. They win the second half 28-10. Coaching wins out there. Mike Sanford didn't do a good job during the season at Western Kentucky. Didn't do a good job in the bowl game. He gets beaten by Sean Elliott and a Georgia State team that, as we talked about last week, one of the lowest power-rated teams to make a bowl game this year, but they wind up winning that one. And then Marshall and Doc Holliday, they're ready to go for Colorado State. Looked very, very good. Had that one in control before Colorado State nearly made it another interesting New Mexico Bowl. But that was the big takeaway to me from Saturday, is that, I looked at everything situationally. I looked at the talent gaps and all that. But it looks like overall coaching just won out all day long.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, Troy had more talent than did North Texas. Western Kentucky, just really flat as a pancake. Georgia State not very good. Western Kentucky was a really poorly coached team all year, and that was the case again on Saturday. Oregon wasn't ready to play on Saturday either, and like you said, Boise State was, so credit to Brian Harsin for that. I think Marshall kind of let their foot off the gas and almost gave that game up against Colorado State. They were certainly the better team in that game. To me, it was we had 3 overs there, 4 overs. So 4 out of 5 games went over the total. One of the few things I've done right here in the last week has been both of my bowl plays, one with the over in the Marshall game and the over in the Middle Tennessee game. I didn't take any sides. I liked Middle Tennessee. I wish I would have taken it. But, I did like Colorado State as well and narrowly missed. I almost played that one. So, to me, Colorado State now 2 years in a row hasn't been very ready for a bowl game. So, I think that, they had a weak opponent last year and they weren't ready to play. And then this year, I still think Colorado State had more talent in that game. So, we'll see moving forward. But Mike Bobo hasn't done a very good job getting his team ready for the bowl game. And maybe that's something that we need to talk about here more going forward is, which coaches have done a really good job this time of the year.
Yeah, and we're going to bypass the Boca Raton Bowl because with the spread that's out there, there's really just not a whole lot to talk about with that game. I do think Florida Atlantic, though, being the more talented team and the more well-coached team, and that sounds grammatically awful, but being the team that's got, Kendall Briles, Lane Kiffin, Kiffin's got the family familiarity there on the defensive side with his brother Chris. And, for Akron, I mean, Terry Bowden's done a good job there with that program, but, no one confuses Akron for being one of the most well-coached teams in the group of five. So when you've got a talent and a coaching edge here, obviously with a big spread, you would consider Akron, but based on what we saw on Saturday, and again, it's a small sample size of games, just 5 of the 39 bowl games that we're looking at here, but still, coaching just plays such a big role, and that's a good segue into Wednesday's Frisco Bowl, because you've got SMU going out there with Sonny Dykes, who just took the job early last week or late the week before, something like that, going up against Skip Holtz, who, say what you will about Skip Holtz when he had jobs at major college programs, but he's done a really good job here at Louisiana Tech. Initially, I probably wanted to look the SMU route, but given what I saw with the importance of coaching last week or this past weekend, kind of changed my tune a little bit on this game.
This is a hard game to handicap. I don't like anything in this game. Louisiana Tech was first in yards per play last year, 56th this year. So a big downgraded quarterback. They didn't get as good a quarterback play as I thought they'd get this year. Weaker offensive line. SMU 15th in yards per play, but their defense is 123rd in yards per play allowed. Louisiana Tech 75th in yards per play allowed. I can't take over 70 with Louisiana Tech's big efficiency drop there on offense, but I wouldn't be excited to take the under either. I don't know what I would do on the side. I would 100% pass on this one, but I thought initially, kind of like you said, that I would lean toward SMU. I don't know if it's a great spot for SMU though, with new coach taking over. Louisiana Tech has a coach who's consistently done a good job for them. I can't really recall if Louisiana Tech's been very good in bowl games just off the top of my head, but this is a game that I don't have any interest in playing. I'm not too interested as a fan, and I don't have any interest in playing it. 60% of bets are on SMU, 63% of the money is on SMU. The sharp money likes the over so far. Haven't seen much of a line move, though. I can't imagine anybody's going to really want to bet the under, so that number might go up a little bit. But, this is a hard game for me.
Under Skip Holtz, Louisiana Tech 3-0 straight up in bowl games, 2-1 against the spread. Didn't cover as a touchdown favorite against Navy last year in a 48-45 thriller. Covered against Arkansas State in the 2015 New Orleans Bowl. They were a 1.5-point favorite there. They won by 19. And then in 2014, the Heart of Dallas Bowl, they were laying 6.5 against Illinois, won that one by 17. So Skip Holtz has had his teams ready for the bowl games here at Louisiana Tech. And, of course, last year going up against that Navy triple option, that's a difficult scheme to try and master because it's very, very hard to replicate that in practice unless you actually run it. So, I don't know. I think maybe I will be looking to go the Louisiana Tech route here on Wednesday. Now, I do think, with what we saw with the line move in that Marshall-Colorado State game, to me it looked like people were buying into what Doc Holliday has done in the bowl season there at Marshall. With what Skip Holtz has done here, going up against that unique coaching situation for SMU, my guess is this number starts to move maybe as early as today. So if you like Louisiana Tech, I think I'd go out there and grab the 5 because I think you'd be stuck with a 4, maybe a 3.5, rather than get this number up to 6. I think now may be the time to play Louisiana Tech. And again, as we've talked about here on the shows, in these early bowl games where you've got probably some higher variance, especially in terms of motivation, I would sprinkle the money line here with Louisiana Tech as well.
Yeah, if you like Louisiana Tech, I would take some money line as well. And Chris has already shown 4.5, and that's one of the sharper books. So, yeah, I think you're probably right that Tech probably gets some money here. If you like Louisiana Tech, I think you go ahead and take them now. If I were forced to take a side, that's probably what I'd do. But like I said, I just don't have much interest here. I think there's plenty of better spots.
All right, let's go to the Bad Boy Mowers Gasparilla Bowl. This one at Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg, home of the Tampa Bay Rays. Temple and Florida International. And kudos to FIU for getting back to a bowl game here. Very, very surprised to see that in Butch Davis's first year, especially because Butch Davis Hadn't coached since, I think 2010 it was. So maybe there's hope for Arizona State with Herm Edwards, who hasn't coached college football in 30 years. But Temple right now, a touchdown favorite pretty much across the market. Bookmaker now showing 6.5, favorite minus 115 there in that one. Do you feel any stronger about this game, Kyle?
I kind of like Temple in this game. This is a Temple team that I feel like has gotten better throughout the course of the season. Florida International's defense has really been weak here at the end of the year. They give up 45 points to UMass in their last game, 52 to FAU a couple weeks earlier, and 37 to ODU before that. Old Dominion certainly not a good offense. I don't trust this Florida International defense at all. I also kind of like the over in this one. So, yeah, I certainly like this game better than the first one we talked about. The money so far is kind of interesting. 56% of the bets are on FIU, 67% of the money is on Temple. So the sharp money so far likes Temple. That would certainly be my lean, and then I also do like the over some. Temple has gotten improved quarterback play throughout the course of the season. If you look at Temple, they've actually outgained their last 7 opponents. They lost three of those games, it looks like. But they've been playing some pretty good football. Even against UCF, they just had a bunch of turnovers that really hurt them. So I think Temple's probably the right side here. To me, this Temple team is more complete than is FIU. FIU certainly had a good turnaround season, and they deserve a lot of credit. But I don't think they're on the same level as Temple.
No, and I think, too, for Temple, I mean, when you look at the prospect of going 7-6 as opposed to 6-7 in Jeff Collins' first year, that's something you want to do. You win 3 of your last 4 to get to a bowl game, knock off Navy at home, win road games against Cincinnati and Tulsa. Only loss in that span coming to Central Florida, which, there's no shame in losing to the Knights. So for Temple, the quarterback change to Frank Newtile really helped them out. I think Jeff Collins has this defense going in the right direction, which is what you would expect for a guy with his defensive pedigree. So you are buying a team that has been trending up. Now, of course, we had this discussion a little bit on last week's show in terms of wanting to play on teams that go into the bowl season struggling because they get a chance to refocus, figure things out, get back on the field, win a game, get some positive feelings going for spring practices. Here you have an opposite situation where Temple was playing pretty well. Then they have to sit, wait around, practice, try to stay focused, then go down to the Sunshine State, much shorter travel for Florida International, obviously. So there's a little bit of a worry there in that regard as well. But I agree with you that they have been getting better, whereas I feel like Florida International was just kind of a paper panther, if you will, throughout the season.
Yeah, definitely. I think Florida International caught teams in some bad situations. For example, Marshall, they won 41-30 at Marshall. They were outgained by 140 yards in that game. Marshall was in a really bad spot there. That's just, I think that happened several times throughout the course of the season for Florida International. I don't think they're as good as their record. Both teams are 6-6 ATS, so neither team's been very good, money-wise. But to me, Temple just a team that doesn't have as many weaknesses as FIU, and FIU's defense is easily the worst unit on the field here. I don't like taking a bad defense. I know you're getting +7. It's not that I love Temple here, but I do like Temple some. 56, I do lean to the over here.
All right, well, let's move on here to Friday. We got a real interesting one here, the Bahamas Bowl between UAB and Ohio. Ohio is 7.5-point favorite across the market. Bookmaker is down to 7, -15 on the favorite. What's interesting to me here about this game is that the total has gone down about 1.5 points from 57 to 55.5. And when I look at something like that, and we talk about this on the show here quite often, you look for context clues in the lines and in the line movement. Ohio is a team that scored up over 40 points per game this season. They have one of the best offenses that they've had in the Frank Solich era with transfer quarterback Nathan Rourke. But with this total moving down, that would suggest to me that somebody out there expects UAB to stop them a little bit, which would have me lean towards the +7.5, even though I do think Ohio clearly the better team here.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before. I feel like you have to love this UAB team. I'm from Ohio, and I kind of root for the Bobcats usually, but I think I want UAB to win this game just as a fan because, I love what they've done this year. Love their coach. But Ohio certainly has better talent. There's no doubt about that, and it's by a pretty wide margin. UAB is going to be ready to play, I would assume, because their coach is just. But at the same time, can you say that UAB has a coaching advantage? I don't think so. Solich has done a really good job with Ohio. To me, this is a game where I would lean with taking the points, like you said, because of you can kind of tell what the market's telling you right here. I will say that this is a really popular underdog, and sometimes that worries me, especially in bowl season. You got 70% of the bets on UAB, 82% of the money on UAB. So a lot of people like UAB here so far. The under, really, really popular. 68% of bets on the under and 90% of the money on the under, which is obviously why the numbers moved down. It's going to be pretty windy for this game, as it usually would be in the Bahamas, but looks like about 13, 14 mile per hour wind. I don't know how much that'll affect the game based on the stadium. To me, UAB certainly has fought hard all year. They're not going to be outplayed as far as how bad they want it. It's just a question of whether you think they can match up with Ohio. Like you said, Ohio has a team that's been able to score quite a few points multiple times this year. I don't like taking under 55.5, 56 some places. I feel like Ohio has too much potency on offense. But at the same time, I think UAB wants this game to be low scoring. They're probably going to try to run the football, use up the clock as much as they can. So, it depends on your perspective of this game. But, I don't like either side very much in this one. I think if I had to, I'd take the points with UAB. Again, this is one where, there's so many bowl games that I feel like you can pick your spots pretty carefully.
Well, here's one thing for Ohio. They are just 2-6 straight up in bowl games in the Frank Solich era. They've been a dog in each of their last 5. Won the first 2, but they have dropped 3 straight bowl games. They've only covered in 1 of those. So Ohio hasn't been a good bowl team, and I'm not really sure what the reason would be behind that. What I do know is that this is one of those games, kind of the quintessential bowl game, where Ohio is the more talented team. Ohio is the team that, has questionable motivation, though. They wanted to win the MAC. They haven't won the MAC since 1968. They lost to Akron, gave up their shot at going to the conference championship game, had a massive hangover in that loss to Buffalo to end the year. So this is a team that fits that criteria of not playing well down the stretch. If they refocus, they should be motivated here to pick up their 9th win of the season. But I just don't know if they're going to do that. I don't know what the mindset is of this Ohio team. Going down to the Bahamas for what basically amounts to a vacation for them. For UAB, instant gratification for the season that they've had, instant gratification for what they've put up with. But also, this is more of a business trip for them because they want to win that bowl game. They want to pick up that 9th win. They want to be, they want to put the final chapter in this storybook. I don't know if Ohio has that same desire because they don't have a storybook that's being written. So while Ohio could blow them out because Ohio is the better team, I just don't know what Ohio is going to look like here. So I'll probably stay off of it from a full game standpoint. Maybe I'll get involved live. I don't love the game, from a betting standpoint here because of the angles I just talked about. But like you, I will be rooting hard for UAB.
I'm seeing some pretty big money showing up on the under right as we're talking here. 54 showing at some books. So somebody really likes the under in this one. I will say, the MAC's been a really bad bowl bet in general. I think 22-33 against the spread in the last 55 bowl games. So, I wouldn't be rushing to back a MAC team laying this many points. It's very rare that a MAC team would be laying this many points in a bowl game. And I think that has something to do with why UAB is catching the money as well.
All right, I think in the interest of time here, what we'll do is we'll take a look at the other bowl game coming up on Friday, and then we'll transition over to the college basketball side. We'll have plenty of time here this week to hit on the bowl games on Saturday and Sunday. Unless there's one that really stands out for you, we can talk about it here before we transition over to the hardwood. But let's talk Central Michigan and Wyoming. I think this is a fascinating bowl game. I don't think it's going to be a pretty bowl game to watch by any means. because you've got two really good defensive teams here. You have two teams that were in the top 40 for the majority of the year in terms of yards per play allowed in Central Michigan and Wyoming. Wyoming, obviously more accustomed to these types of conditions, being out there in the Mountain West Conference, a little bit of altitude in Boise, going to be cold, could very well be windy, but it's not like it doesn't get cold in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, where Central Michigan is either. So I kind of wonder how that whole thing's going to play out. Obviously, the biggest question in this game is Wyoming quarterback Josh Allen. If he plays, what level he's going to play at. But still, this could be kind of one of those throwback games with a lot of running of the football, a lot of defense. Could be a nice change of pace. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you're more interested in this game than I am. So, maybe we can talk about one of the Saturday games that I like more than this. But, Central Michigan, not very good defensively. I feel like if Allen plays in this game, the over would be my lean. But, I certainly think it's still questionable whether he's going to play in this game. And, Wyoming, defensively, they're much better at stopping the run. I think Central Michigan will probably try to throw the ball a decent amount in this one. So I think if you get Allen to play in this game, over 44.5 would seem like a value. I think that's why the total is so low, is because there's so much, unknown when it comes to whether Allen's going to play in this game.
Central Michigan is 31st in yards per play against, 5.06, but the problem for them, the reason they've given up so many points is that they've turned the ball over a ton this year. They turned the ball over, let's see here, I'm looking through the chart. They turned the ball over 23 times. Now, they do have 31 takeaways, so it's kind of an all-or-nothing risk-reward type of defense. If they can take the ball away, then they can prevent points. If they don't take the ball away, they're losing the field position battle, and, at that point, the defense does tend to have some problems. So, again, that's where Allen comes into play. If Josh Allen can play in this game and can take care of the football, which has been a little bit of a challenge without much at the skill positions for Wyoming this season, there are a lot of ifs for this game, though, and that's what makes it an intriguing handicap to me. I like that process. I love when a game jumps off the page to me. That's obviously fantastic, and that's the ideal scenario. But I also like the games where I've got a lot of those ifs, and I can sit there, and because of the nature of the bowl games where there's 39 bowl games instead of 65 games on a regular Saturday, I can actually break these down a little bit more. I feel like maybe there are angles to be had in this game, and as the picture gets clearer approaching Friday, maybe we'll find some more of them. But, still, I think this is a pretty interesting game just for the simple fact that, it's a forgotten bowl game. It's a bowl game that a lot of people aren't talking about, and sometimes those are the ones that surprise.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, again, I'd have a hard time backing the MAC team. Maybe if Allen doesn't play here, then you take Central Michigan. But, the MAC has done so bad in bowl games that I wouldn't be too excited to take Central Michigan here. If Allen plays, I might take Wyoming. Again, I think this is a difficult handicap, and I've actually gotten a few people asking, why I haven't played more of bowl games so far. I try to pick my spots pretty carefully this time of the year. When it's a big Saturday, I may have 11 games or something like that. But, bowl season, you get 5 games. Some people think you should play all 5. I don't think that's really a great idea. I know some handicappers do that. I think that's kind of questionable to just take every single game during the season. You pick 3 or 4 games on a Saturday. So I try to pick my spots pretty carefully, and it's worked out for me in the past. And, I think this is a tough one for me. I see this total is moving up right as we talk. There's a lot of action here as we talk here on Monday morning. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this game. And I think, based on what's happening in the line right now, Wyoming's catching money going up to -1.5, and then the over going up here by 1.5 right as we talk. I think somebody thinks Allen's going to play in this game.
Yeah, I'm guessing that is the report. Not a big surprise either coming out of the weekend. And, with both of these teams traveling up to Boise, they may already be there, but I'm sure they'd leave today if they were going. So, obviously Allen probably with the team, and that's sort of the catalyst for a line move. And it's also not a big surprise either to see these line moves now that week 15 of the NFL is behind us, because guys are more willing to, start to tap into that bankroll a little bit now that the NFL weekend is passed. So good to see some of these moves going on out there in the market. And again, we'll be following these throughout the week here on Bang the Book Radio. I guess before we transition over to college basketball, you mentioned a Saturday game that you're kind of interested in. What's that one?
I'm interested in all of them, but, in the interest of time, let's talk about Texas Tech and USF a little bit. I like USF minus the points here. I think Tech tends to peak early in the season. There's only one conference that's done worse than the MAC in bowl season in the last 10 years, and it's been the Big 12. I don't trust Kingsbury. I don't trust the Tech defense. I know the USF defense hasn't been really that good this season, but I certainly trust their defense more than Texas Tech. Flowers is playing really well here at the end of the season. USF really outplayed UCF in that last game. Their offense was really, really good. I like USF minus the points in this one. I think that, they have a really good quarterback. They have the better defense, and you're laying this short of the number. So I do like USF.
I think that makes sense. When you look back at what Charlie Strong's done in bowl games here so far, 3-3 straight up in those. The one thing that concerns me is Texas Tech does have a much better defensive coordinator in David Gibbs this year than what they've had for their past bowl appearances. So, maybe that does help them out a little bit. Now, I could make the same Quentin Flowers case that I tried to make for Mike White there with Western Kentucky, in that he's got one more chance to impress, and he knows that, and he's probably not a guy that plays at the next level anyway. But the thing for Western Kentucky is Mike White didn't play bad per se. The offensive line just didn't help him at all. Georgia State was in the backfield a lot throughout that game. White was 26-39 for 351, but he just didn't have time to throw. Now, you would think that South Florida would, give Quentin Flowers time to throw, and also his mobility would help him in that regard. So, I think that's it's a game that I don't have a strong opinion on necessarily, but I don't think that you're on the wrong track by any means.
Okay, and let me mention here real quick, Army and San Diego State, a couple notes on this one. Military schools have actually done really well in bowl games. It's been pretty impressive what they've done. You would wonder, how does a military school get up after they play, Army, Navy, that type of thing. They've done really well. Monken is 6-3 ATS bowl games. Rocky Long's good against the triple option, but that's certainly built into this number. If you just asked me beforehand what I thought I would take in this game, I would have probably said San Diego State or the under, but San Diego State is no value at all in this game. And I still lean the under with so much running and both teams going so slowly. So I think that's an interesting game as well.
No, I think so too. I mean, that 3-3-5 is just designed to handicap the option because you've got so many parts of the field covered. If you're gap responsible with the front six, you've got that back five that can come and clean everything up. And of course, playing it, against Air Force, almost every year, San Diego State does see this quite a bit, which does help them. Army looking for their 10th win, so there's a little bit of a motivating factor for them. I kind of wanted to go the opposite route and go the over because I know that this total is priced low from the slow pace and from all the running. But obviously the problem with that is, the slow pace and the running. I do think San Diego State can move the football quite a bit. I mean, Rashad Penny, over 2,000 yards this year, chip on his shoulder for not being part of the Heisman ceremony show. So, that's a guy that wants to go out there and hang two bills if he can. Army, they've been so efficient with that option. And I know San Diego State's seen it a lot, but Army's been really, really good with it. So, I don't know. I mean, maybe if this total does drop a little bit in the 42, 43 range, maybe I'll play back on the over just for some rooting interest. But, yeah, everything is priced into the number for sure for that game. All right, let's transition over to the college basketball side here. Lots of notes to try and run through in this segment here. And, like I said, once college football is over, and, of course, that'll be, a couple weeks from today. Then we'll have one more game for the national championship. We'll be focusing on college basketball exclusively here during these segments. That'll be our Handicapping the Hardwood segment. But we like to cover injuries and suspensions and things of that sort that are a little bit under the radar or those that are very prominent. So I know you've got three teams specifically listed here. Some teams have more than one problem, though.
Bradley's played pretty well so far this year, and they've been covering the number well. JoJo McGlass is suspended indefinitely there. I think it's hard to say, how much that means to this team. He was one of their key contributors last year. They have a lot of really good young players that have kind of overtaken him in the lineup. So this is a team that's certainly improving. They're no longer a really young team. I remember a couple of years ago, they were starting like all freshmen. So now those guys are grown up. Bradley's a better team. They're good on defense. But McGlasson was one of their better offensive players last year. I still think that it could hurt them a bit being without him in the long run. Valpo, you got Tevin Walker out indefinitely with mono. I've never had mono, but I know several people who've had mono, and this is an illness that really knocks you out. I think it's going to be a really long time before Walker's 100%. He's certainly the team's best player. I think this is probably the most important one to keep an eye on moving forward, because Valpo is an interesting team, and they're going through a huge transition to the Missouri Valley to start with, which is certainly a tougher league than what they have been in the past. And now without their best player for a while, and then even when he comes back, he's not going to be 100%. I think this hurts the team quite a bit.
Yeah, and those are always such difficult things, too, when you've got some teams that are in transition, teams that have lost some guys that were very good players, or even changing conferences with Valpo, as you mentioned, going to the Missouri Valley. Anytime you lose a guy that you're relying on, you've got great talent to play in the Horizon, even without him. But to jump up in leagues and then lose one of your star players, that's something that is really challenging, especially as you said with mono. It lingers. You go a long time without getting your full strength back before you feel like yourself. So that's definitely one to keep a very close eye on. Yeah,
absolutely. And the last one I had was Providence. A little less under the radar here, but I still think it's worthy of mention. They're getting really thin in the front court. Emmett Holt was a key contributor for them last year, and he's out for the season, hasn't played at all this year. Alfred Diallo has an ankle injury now, so the front court, they really do not have anybody good enough to defend the majority of the teams they're going to be playing against. Malik Brown in the backcourt also hurt right now. I'd be really cautious with this team. They haven't done very well at ATS so far this year, so the odds makers are probably going to be fairly low on them. So I'm not necessarily saying go against Providence every game or anything, but I'd be cautious with this team. I feel like this is a team that's really short-handed right now, and not one that I'd want to back.
Well, and with the way that the Big East is set up, too, with conference play coming around now, and of course we'll revisit this injury situation here when they start conference play on the 28th, but the way that this league is set up, I mean, you're talking about them playing St. John's and then going out to Creighton, coming home and playing Marquette and Xavier, going all the way out to DePaul, coming back home to host Butler and Creighton. The Big East is kind of spread out a little bit now with the way that conference realignment has gone on. So if you've got some of those back-to-backs that are, those back-to-back travel situations, obviously they don't play consecutive days unless it's a tournament, but the back-to-back road games, you start talking about weaker depth, that's where you can run into a lot of problems.
Yeah, absolutely. You catch them in a bad spot, don't have enough depth, they might get run out of the gym here at some point. So that's something to keep an eye on in Providence going forward.
All right, so we've been touching on some buy low and sell high types of teams here just to, because we talk all the time about how perception means so much, recency bias means so much, and those teams that have been burning the books, those teams with very good ATS records, the books start taking notice. They start shading those teams a half a point, a point and a half, depending on the situation. So who is your sell high team this week, Kyle?
I'm going to sell high on South Alabama. They're 7-1 ATS here. This is a team that's turning the ball over a bunch so far this year. And South Alabama doesn't have much height either. So if you have bad ball handlers, you don't have much height. This is a team that I think has a bad combination in the long run. I don't see them as a very strong team. So far this year, they've been winning against really weak opposition, covering the spread in a narrow way multiple times. And then you've also got them really been winning because the other team's been shooting such a poor percentage. If you look at them over the last couple seasons, I think that's probably more the other teams are shooting really poorly than it is South Alabama having great defense. So this is a team that I like to fade here quite a bit. I think there's going to be some good value going against South Alabama here going forward.
South Alabama, 333rd in the country in points per game, just 64.8. Obviously, those numbers will settle in a little bit more once teams stop playing inferior competition in the non-conference. But how does South Alabama stack up in the Sun Belt? I mean, are they kind of a middle-of-the-pack type of team, or is this a conference where we can get some regression to the mean with their ATS record?
I think they're a middle-of-the-pack type of team in the Sun Belt. Sun Belt, obviously, a weak conference. UT Arlington would be at the top of that conference, Georgia Southern and Lafayette. But I think South Alabama is middle to bottom tier in the Sun Belt. So I think that, going against South Alabama is going to have some value here going forward. If you look at South Alabama's schedule, they're certainly going to play better teams than they have been so far. Even this week they play at Tulane, and then they go Georgia State, Georgia Southern, UT Arlington also pretty soon. I think there's going to be some good state spots on them coming up.
All right, and for your buy low team here, we're going to go to the Colonial Athletic Association, hit on one of these programs. Who are you looking at?
Elon. Elon is number one, according to Ken Palm, in minutes continuity. So this is a team that has players back from last year. The same guys are playing a lot of minutes. Elon should be improved this season. I think they have a solid coach. They played 3 overtime games earlier this year, got worn out, and they were blown out by UNC Greensboro. Sometimes you get one of these games where, this happens in college football more often than it does in college basketball, but occasionally you'll get one game where a team gets really blown out, and they're likely undervalued by afterwards because, so much is made of that one game. So I think that Elon's one of those teams where you got a good veteran president, solid coach. I think this team's a little bit undervalued now. They haven't done very well ATS. I will say I don't quite like this buy low quite as much as I like to sell high that I talked about here, but I do think Elon could be a good team to back going forward.
One of the things that we like to do here on these Handicapping the Hardwood segments is we like to look at a variety of games. Some of them, could possibly be plays, and Kyle generally mentions that when he's talking about the game. Some of them are just because they're, interesting for a variety of reasons, whether there's a pace war, whether there's something we can learn about these teams, a really bad situational spot, some kind of thing like that. So we got 5 of those here to talk about this week. We'll start on Tuesday night. This is a real interesting one here between Buffalo and Syracuse. And this is one of those games where you can kind of find that little brother, big brother type complex in the sense that Syracuse, has been more or less the face of basketball in the state of New York for a very, very long time. Buffalo has won some MAC conference tournaments. They've gone to the NCAA tournament and made a little bit of noise in the past before. Is this spot set up particularly well for either one of these teams?
Yeah, I like Buffalo in this game. Syracuse was really fortunate to win in overtime at Georgetown. Very, very fortunate. I think Buffalo is a good team. They have a good coach. Like you say, Buffalo has more to play for in this game. Syracuse is a big-name team. Buffalo's the little guy coming in here, probably going to be about a 10-point underdog, something like that. If they're bigger than a 10-point underdog, I may be taking Buffalo in this one. I certainly think the dog makes the most sense here. I'm not convinced that Syracuse is really that good this year. Maybe I'll be wrong. We'll see. They really haven't proven that much so far this year. They beat Maryland 72-70 at home. They just won at Georgetown 86-79 in OT, and I'm pretty sure Georgetown's not going to be very good by the end of the season here. So, Georgetown's played a really weak schedule so far this year. I think Syracuse is down from what they normally are, and I think this gives Buffalo one of those rare chances to really play a tight game against the big brother, as you say.
Yeah, and I think you look at it, too. You look at who Syracuse has played lately. Maryland, a very good team. They won that game by a bucket. Kansas, obviously we know Kansas is generally a pretty good team. UConn, then they played Colgate in what was a little bit of a sandwich spot. I don't know if there was a number for that game or not, but I can't imagine winning by 14 was enough to cover there in that one if there was a number. And then the Georgetown game. So 2 of the last 3 games for Syracuse against former Big East foes. Now they take on Buffalo. It does look like a little bit of a flat spot for sure.
Yeah, and it's a pretty quick turnaround. You play on Saturday, going to overtime against Georgetown, and then you play again Tuesday against Buffalo. On the other side, Buffalo had a game on Saturday as well, but that was an easy 86-70 win over Robert Morris. So I think that gives them the better spot. Syracuse was also on the road for that game at Georgetown. So I think this is a difficult spot for Syracuse, and it's one where I'd rather take Buffalo.
All right, we'll move to Wednesday here, and it's a game requested by our good buddy Mikey DFS on Twitter, who listens to the show every day, and I've had a chance to talk with him a little bit, on Twitter and all that. Really great guy, and kudos to him, and thanks to him for always listening. But we got a pace war here. One of the games that you love to talk about, Youngstown State and Utah State.
Yeah, this is an interesting game for a few reasons, actually. Youngstown State's trying to play as fast as anybody in the country. You read notes from Jared Calhoun before the season. He's saying, I want us to be the fastest-paced team in the country. We're just going to cause all kinds of havoc. You look at their stat profile so far this year, they have been atrocious on defense, just awful. Opposing teams shooting 61.5% on two-point shots against them. They're getting a bunch of layups, easy shots. Youngstown State's playing really fast and doing it terribly. So, how are they going to do here? Youngstown State's on a really weird road trip here where they go to Idaho State Monday. They play at Utah State on Wednesday. Utah State wants to go slow here. Utah State usually controls the tempo pretty well. Youngstown State wants to play fast. I would lean toward taking Utah State minus the points in this one. I know Mikey wanted to know my thoughts on, whether Youngstown State's totals, maybe they're a little bit too high at this point. That's a hard call for me. Youngstown State's 9th in tempo so far this season. You have to wonder if at some point Calhoun's going to rethink his strategy of trying to play as fast as they possibly can because they're just getting blown out every single game. Usually as a coach, if you lose every game by 20, 30 points doing what you're doing, eventually you'd kind of change your game plan. But so I think that I would rather have the under than I would the over in Youngstown State games going forward. But having said that, that's a hard bet to make. I think if you get a number like 160, something like that, I think the under would make some sense because Utah State's going to be trying so hard to slow this game down.
And I think it's really interesting for Youngstown State here, too, in that they play in Pocatello, Idaho, against Idaho State. Elevation 4,462 feet above sea level. So back-to-back games in altitude for a team that wants to run like crazy. That seems like a really suboptimal spot here for a Youngstown State team that's clearly not used to playing in altitude. I kind of wonder if, laying the big number that Utah State's going to have here may be worth it, especially if they can take advantage of that really bad Youngstown State defense. Because remember, when it comes to tired legs, offense is generally okay for the most part, unless you take a lot of jump shots like I imagine Youngstown State does. But it's on the defensive end where you really get hurt by having those tired legs. So Utah State may be able to name the score here so long as they're invested.
Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at Youngstown State's profile. I mean, this is just a terrible team. They shoot 55.7% from the free throw line. I think Adam and I could probably shoot better than that from the free throw line. So, this is one of the spots where Youngstown State's just about as bad as you can be. Utah State minus a point, but they're going to be minus quite a few points in this one, maybe 17 points, 16 points. I think it's hard to lay that many points, but there's no way I'd take Youngstown State. Like you said, it's a really bad spot. If you get a little bit of a discount on Utah State, maybe it's minus 14, minus 14.5. I think it's a good look. Utah State has not played many teams as bad as Youngstown State. They played Mississippi Valley State, who's probably worse than Youngstown State. Beat them 83-47. They beat New Hampshire by 14 points on a neutral. And then they played some other decent teams, Weber State, BYU, Utah, Valpo. So Utah State is definitely stepping down in class. Youngstown State in a bad spot. It certainly won't surprise me if this is a blowout.
Well, and if you look at what's going on with Utah State here, if you go look on their ESPN page, it could be in a letdown spot because they beat Life last time they played. So, anytime you conquer Life, it's probably hard to come back there and play the next game. All right, well, let's look at another game here on Wednesday. UTSA takes on Nebraska, and you have it in your notes here. This is the favorite for you of the games that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think I'll probably be on this one. So, last week I ended up not taking Arizona against New Mexico. Hopefully some people who listen to the show did. I was hoping to get 13, 12.5, 13. Arizona was minus 14.5 or 15. They won by 16, so hopefully some people took it. I didn't. I wish I had. Wish I would have. But, in this one, it's one where I think I'm going to take UTSA no matter what the number is here. Nebraska's in a really bad spot. I watched the end of that game, Nebraska against Kansas, an ultimate heartbreaking loss. Nebraska's really gotten up for 2 games in a row here. Creighton, a team that's really not that far away either, they played them pretty tight, ended up losing by 10 points. And what was a very close game throughout. Nebraska actually led for much of that game, then they lost by 10. Then they played Kansas. They had Kansas beaten. I mean, that is a really, really tough for a program like Nebraska when you have, a team like Kansas beaten. You lose on your home floor by 1 point. Now you play UTSA. Why would they be excited to play UTSA here? I couldn't think of any reason why they would be. And if you look at UTSA, they've been really competitive so far this year. They played Bradley, who I said is a pretty decent team, to a 2-point loss on a neutral. They lost to Tulsa on the road by 4, and they lost by 12 to Oklahoma. And, that loss looks pretty good now. When you look at what Oklahoma's done, Oklahoma winning at Wichita State, this UTSA team might not be that bad. And I think they're going to be a double-digit dog here against Nebraska. And I think it's probably going to give us some extra line value that Nebraska has played so well in their last couple of games. Most people are going to see Nebraska almost beat Kansas and say, I want to back Nebraska coming up. And instead, I see it the other way, that it's really hard for them to get off the mat.
All right, let's move over to Friday here. A couple more games that we want to touch on. And this one is certainly unique, to say the least. Princeton and Middle Tennessee State. Break this one down for us. What's the scenario here in this game?
This is a really wild game. Princeton's on a long road trip here. For some reason, a long West Coast road trip. And then this game is in Hawaii. So they play 2 games on the West Coast to start with. Then they go play at Hawaii against Middle Tennessee State. So Princeton's in a really weird spot that they would usually never be in. They won at Cal Poly 80-60. Cal Poly's not very good. So I don't think I would take too much out of that win. Princeton's down from last year. Their defense isn't as good. They still play slowly. They're going to have a lot of low-scoring games. I would say that these two teams are fairly similar teams in the way that they try to play, just that Middle Tennessee State's a lot better at it than Princeton. If you look at Princeton playing against USC before this game on Tuesday, and then they play Friday here, Middle Tennessee coming off a loss against Auburn on Saturday, and they don't play until this game on Friday. So Middle Tennessee is certainly in a better spot in this game. I think Middle Tennessee will probably be -5.5 or -6 points here. I would like Middle Tennessee at that price point. I'm not sure I'll play this one, but I certainly lean this way, and I might take it. Middle Tennessee State's very well coached, a team that was really disappointed in their performance against Auburn. I read some of the notes from Kermit Davis after the game from his press conference. He was really disappointed in his team's defense in that game. I think you get a better effort from them here, and I think Princeton's in a bad spot.
One other game that we want to highlight here in our Handicapping the Hardwood segment, and I like this one because when we talk about bad spots for teams, we talk about travel situations like the one that we just discussed there with Princeton out on the West Coast for a little bit, playing a couple of California schools, then going out to Hawaii. But sometimes it can be a bad spot in college basketball because with 351 teams, you're going to play different styles every night. And it's kind of like in college football when, you go from playing an option offense to an air raid, or you go from playing, a power running game to a spread. Sometimes it can be kind of tough to make that transition. And especially, if you play one of those option teams and you're getting cut blocked all game and all that type of stuff, sometimes schemes create a bad spot. Xavier might be in one of those later this week.
Yeah, Xavier's in an interesting spot here. Xavier almost lost to East Tennessee State on Saturday. What did they trail by 20-some points? Yeah, 22 points in that game with 14 minutes left. So really fortunate to come back and win that game. Certainly a flat spot game for them. Xavier's been really good ATS so far this year. And we knew that they were going to come back to earth ATS at some point. Now they've played Marshall on Tuesday. Marshall plays as fast as anybody in the country. That's going to be a really, really high total game, probably 175 or even higher. Then they go play Northern Iowa at Northern Iowa, which, first of all, this is a good home game for Northern Iowa. They would rarely get teams like Xavier to go play at their place. Xavier, this is just such a big change of pace. You get a game that's probably going to be totaled 175 against Marshall. and then you get a game that maybe totaled 136 or 137 against Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa's going to try their very best to slow this game down, win this game with defense. Northern Iowa does not want to get into a high-scoring game with Xavier. They would almost always lose that type of game. To me, this is one where I would lean toward the under just because I think Northern Iowa will be able to slow this game down. I would also lean to Northern Iowa plus the points. I think they'll probably be, 6 or 7 point underdog in this one, depending on what happens with Xavier on Tuesday. But I think this isn't a very good spot for Xavier. More than anything else, though, I think this is a spot where we learn about these two teams. I'm not sure I'm going to play this one, but I think it's a good one to learn, how does Xavier turn around, from playing one really fast team to playing the other style. Can Xavier play both ways? Because, we've seen them run against almost everybody so far this year. They've played one team that goes really slow, and that was Baylor, and they won and did a good job in that game. That was at home. Can they do the same thing on the road? And then Northern Iowa, what do they do against a team that is really, really good at running, can really score a lot of points? Can they force the other team to play at their pace? So that's what I want to see in this game.
A lot of good thoughts today from Kyle Hunter of HunterSportsPicks.com. What's going on over there at the website right now, man?
Free picks going up. Check out the free pick articles. Sin City Sharp been writing up free pick articles for me. He's 9-2. He's going to be doing some more free pick articles in the bowl games, so keep an eye on those at HunterSportsPicks.com. Also sign up for that free picks newsletter, 61 and 31, the last 92 free plays. And Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to all the listeners. Great time of the year. Hope everybody gets to have a good time with family and friends.
Yeah, and for right now, our tentative plan is to have Kyle on the show next Tuesday. We'll just do the full hour with him, probably split it half and half, college football and college basketball, assuming everything lines up there with that. So even though we're not doing the show next Monday, should be able to hear from him on Tuesday. I'm sure I'll talk to you off the air, Kyle, but happy holidays, Merry Christmas to you and yours. Hope everybody's feeling better down there, and I'll talk to you again real soon.
Same to you. Thank you.